Getting bigger by being better.
The number one choice for Bristol.
This is BCFM
93.2.
Well, in case you hadn't noticed, there's a general election in 2 weeks' time, but the week before is some would say, a more important get-together, and that is the Bilderberg Conference, which we managed to confirm last week is taking place in Chantilly, Virginia. That's next weekend. Out covering it will be Charlie Skelton for The Guardian. We hope to have him on next Friday. But this week, just to take a bit of a deeper look at this organisation, I'm joined on the line, I hope, by Hannah Borno. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the Politics Show.
Hi, Tony. Hi.
Yes, I think you're just about there. I can just about hear you. Anyhow, could you just give us your take on who these people are? I think they're being a little bit more secretive, the Bilderbergers, recently.
They are. They used to. They used to sort of reply to emails if you sent an email to their website, which popped up in the middle of the 2012 meeting in Sitges. But now they don't reply to emails anymore. They don't like to announce when the meeting's taking place, and we could only manage to get it confirmed through talking to Sully District Police, who finally let it leak that this important get together was happening. It's for those who haven't heard of them, it's really quite hard to convey the kind of scope of this group. It covers finance, the intelligence services, politics, banking, and defence. You have the head of the IMF, the head of the NATO often goes, head of MI6, and they all sort of get together and closet themselves away, probably about participants, and then discuss issues of concern globally. And I think it's the most amazing insider information gets exchanged there. Any kind of private group, whether it's a golf club or anything, has got a right to get together privately. Why do you think that's not on with these guys? Well, you've got heads of banks and corporations, the chairman of Goldman Sachs International and the CEO of HSBC can get together and chat and exchange, thoughts and insights all day long, as far as I'm concerned. But when you sort of start sprinkling into the mix a whole lot of elected public officials, we've had prime ministers, finance ministers. David Cameron attended in 2013, and George Osborne was, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, was a frequent attendee. Then it gets a little bit more murky. They're attending now, we've been told, it always used to be in private capacity, but now they're attending in official capacity, and the taxpayers are paying for their expenses to travel to this meeting. But there's no press oversight and no minutes are shared publicly. So we wonder, really, should our elected officials be closeted up with all these banks and hedge fund grandees? Probably not.
Okay. Also, the meeting's planned 18 months in advance. How do you know that?
Well, I don't really know it, but we suspect it because they will book a venue in advance, and sometimes you can sort of try and identify where the venue is, and it's booked well in advance. It's a very, very tight organisational team based in Leiden in the Netherlands. They're on it. I mean, you don't sort of get these schedules cleared in a few weeks. They send out their invites, well over a year in advance, I'm sure. Although sometimes, if they're picking talent or if they're, something exciting's happening, they probably, have a few last minute invites as well. So, but yeah, they already know the venue for Bilderberg 2018.
So we better try and find that out.
Slip.
I mean, what possible ways are there to discover where the venue's going to be, and how can listeners help?
Well, there's quite a lot of detective work. Sometimes the police in the area will announce it a few weeks in advance. Often it's more a case of looking at the trends. Where have they had their meetings before? They'll usually have 3 or 4
years based in Europe, and then they're usually in America in an election year. This year is different. This is the 5 years they've been in Europe. So we last had America in 2012. So now, 2018, they'll be going back to Europe. And who knows where they'll be. I haven't been to Portugal for a while. It's looking like maybe it's Portugal. But it's a question of sort of then just looking at some of the, luxury hotels that they like and seeing if any are booked up. It's just, it's that kind of spade work, really.
Now, I know that you've done quite a lot of work on the charity, Bilderberg's charity, which actually, if you take a step back from it, you might even think it looks like a money laundering outfit.
Well, they certainly. It's very difficult to get to the bottom of their funding. Obviously, these people are super rich, but they don't really like to pay taxed money for anything. They like everything to be tax free.
No, and I noticed, by the way, when they were in. Sorry to interrupt you, but when they were in Hertfordshire in 2013, they actually got the local taxpayers to fork out for their security, even though it's supposed to be a private meeting. I mean, £1 million pounds the local taxpayers paid towards their security.
It was millions, and even the police were just, they were in their pocket. It was almost like they'd hired them as their own private army, really. But they actually funded the meeting and paid for the hotel via a charity called the Bilderberg Association, which is based in the UK, and each country will have its own association or charity or something called, say, in America it's called Friends of Bilderberg, which functions as a kind of washing this money through. So the Bilderberg Association gets donations from BP and Goldman Sachs as a charity, so it's all tax exempt. And then that money is sort of held until the next time Bilderberg takes place in the UK. And now we've had it in 2013. It probably won't be for about another 15 years. But they sort of build up the fund, and then they can splurge and have like because it costs them, they've got to reserve a luxury hotel for 4 or 5 days. And they've got all their own private security as well. And actually, I think the security in the UK was paid for by Barclays. We've got that little tidbit of information. So, all these corporations pitch in.
Now, one of the things we did last year was we had the luxury, which there won't be this year, of the Bilderbergers wandering out and having a look around Dresden. And it was fascinating to sort of approach them, ask them questions. The word Brexit they didn't seem to like very much. No, they sort of almost like a knee-jerk reaction can run off in the opposite direction or start getting angry, as soon as you say that word. But look, there was also you met up with, or you stood quite close to one of the participants of the steering committee. Now, because this is the way it works, there's a steering committee that meets up sometimes during the year, but they are the kind of core of the Bilderbergers, and these are the people that the old guard, David Rockefeller and people like that, Henry Kissinger, are sort of hoping will take this organisation into the future. Do you want to just take us through a couple of those people who are on that list? I mean, I've got the list in front of me, but the sorts of industries they're in. Obviously, we know there's loads of bankers in there, but what about there are quite a lot of technology companies too, aren't there? They're high-tech, internet and data mining firms. Yeah,
they've really updated the list recently and then sort of brought it, into the 21st century. So on the steering committee you have Craig Mundy, who was from Microsoft. You have Alex Karp of Palantir, data mining technology, who was brought in by Peter Thiel, who's also on the steering committee, and obviously he's a sort of cutting-edge venture capitalist. You've got Eric Schmidt as well.
He's the Google boss, by the way, folks.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very tech-heavy, the steering committee. But also, from the Brit side of things, we've got John Sawyers, who was, the head of MI6.
Well, it's funny because on the list, the official list they put out, it says he's chairman of Macro Advisory Partners, but it doesn't mention anything to do with the fact he was the Director General of the MI6.
No, I know. It looks kind of fine, doesn't it? So he's really going to give a lot of insight to them about the way, foreign policy and the way the intelligence services are thinking. It's quite a few Americans on the list.
What about Marie José Kravis? Let's just talk about her for a minute, because the Hudson Institute, people think, oh, well, it's just a sort of innocent little think tank. But I know I was there with you last year in Dresden when we could overhear her talking about a great enthusiasm for genetic engineering.
Oh, she's very pro-GMO, and she's very. The Hudson Institute does an awful lot of research attempting to discredit organic food as well. Although I'm sure she eats organic. She's very glamorous and healthy. She's also they have put in that she's the president of the American Friends of Bilderberg, which she didn't have on the list before, because they usually try to keep these domestic organisations under wraps. So that's interesting. They've called her that, and she's also she might be on some kind of board associated with the Federal Reserve as well. I mean, they often don't put everything that. They try to make them sound as anodyne as possible. So Victor Halberstadt, who's the president of the Bilderberg Secretariat in the Netherlands, he's just got, kind of humble title as Professor of Economics, Leiden University. But he's a, consultant to Goldman Sachs. He's an advisory partner of Goldman Sachs. And he really is the mastermind at the moment.
I suppose one of the most fascinating things about this is you often see the figures that we do see in public, because of course this lot are pretty much anonymous. You walk past them in the street, you wouldn't even recognise them, and they love that. I noticed the way they hate being called out, don't they?
Tony.
Sorry?
In Dresden, James A. Johnson, who's on the steering committee, the chairman of Johnson Capital Partners, and hugely wealthy.
Goldman Sachs.
He loves putting on a white baseball cap and then just kind of slinking out. And he gets a real kick out of it, walking through the protesters just in this little white baseball cap. But we were onto him, weren't we, last year? And you had a little chat with him. He turned a bit nasty, though.
Yeah, he was just a bit rude, that's all. I mean, you know, this kind of, you can't answer them a sensible question. But look, the idea that they want to be anonymous, they enjoy the anonymity. But the thing is that the people who go that then become, world leaders, we're talking about Secretary Generals of NATO, President of the United States, British Prime Minister, they are it's almost as if they're being brought along to schmooze them. Now, I wonder what you make of Trump, because he's exactly the kind of person that would possibly be schmoozed by all these princes, queens, heads of government in other parts of the world,
they just have to
bankers.
flatter him a little bit, and he'd probably be putty in their hands. I mean, we know that the Trump does have some links to Bilderberg, because Peter Thiel was on Trump's transition team and also a Trump donor. And also we've seen Henry Kissinger kind of waddle into Trump Tower. And Henry Kissinger is a very, very powerful force within Bilderberg. Some would say, the most powerful, even above Halberstadt. So I don't know. Trump might well go on Saturday evening. That's the time for that. Their kind of, glitzy dinner. That's the time that they would get heads of state in like that. We'll see. There is a back entrance to the Marriott Chantilly. Maybe the cavalcade will go in that way. Certainly in 2012, Mitt Romney did attend under wraps, and his kind of convoy went in through the back. And we were told that by hotel staff that Mitt Romney was at the Saturday night's event. So, it's possible that Trump will go. He'll probably like going, schmoozing and being flattered or whatever, but who knows? Be interesting to see if it happens. To be honest, if he does go in through the back, the only way, it's quite impossible to verify whether he did go or not.
OK, let's also get your guess on what might be on the agenda this year. We'll imagine in a week or so's time we'll know what that agenda is. We'll be able to cover it here, hopefully next Friday.
Yeah.
But go on, have a bit of a guess. I just want to say,
when we talk about talent spotting, though, because you're saying that they often get people in before they're picked to be heads of state or, big world leaders.
Yeah, the Kingmakers.
We had that. Yeah, exactly. Macron was there in 2014 when he was really not particularly, it was something like deputy secretary to the presidency or something. I mean, he was some really minor player then, but yet he was there at 2014. And also Edouard Philippe, who obviously now is the Prime Minister, would also attended a couple of years ago.
So they really are.
Really do.
They're kingmakers, aren't they?
Yeah, they like to see the new talent and sort of okay it before it goes on. And we saw that with Tony Blair and David Cameron as well. So, what do you think's on the agenda, Tony, then?
Well, I asked you first, but I would suggest the fallout from the Turkish coup attempt last year will almost certainly be there on the agenda, and as will the relationships with the Russians over Syria, this kind of thing.
Yeah, they're definitely going to want to address populism, I think, as well. And Brexit and those kind of issues. I mean, that's a big trend, and I'm sure we will see something on terrorism and surveillance as usual. I mean, there's a really tech-heavy part to these agendas now. And things like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity is like always kind of comes almost every year nowadays. So
what is this interest in, if you could call it obsession with high tech and technology, and what is it that you think makes it actually worth spending a bit of time looking at this every year when it comes around?
When you look at the agenda for Bilderberg, and you look at, perhaps more importantly, because they give so little away in their kind of really skeleton agendas, look at the participants, you can get an idea of what might be happening in the future and kind of predict trends that way. But yeah, like for example, Basma Mani in 2012 was there, and she was a real kind of left field wild card, and then you looked into her and her background, and she was part of this kind of nascent Syrian opposition that was beginning, and then you could piece together with a few of the other participants that they really did have big plans for Syria, and of course that all took place later on. It all unfolded. So it's just sometimes people that are there that are appear not very important, or you wonder why they're there. When you can then get an idea of the issues concerning the Bilderberg Steering Committee. And I would say, when you talk about members of Bilderberg, that personally, I don't know how you feel about this, Tony, I would just say the members of the Steering Committee.
They are effectively, and there are all sorts of other people brought along.
For just their, to pick their brains, or because of their role, or they think that they can be useful. But when they stop having that role, or when they've exhausted what they have to learn from them, they won't invite them back. Whereas the steering committee seems to me the core, and ex-members of the steering committee as well.
Also, I mean, they're a very powerful force outside the democratic process, completely outside. And it was fascinating talking to Klaus Kopf last year, who he was working at the War and Peace Studies Institute up in Hamburg, where his lecturer actually started screaming and shouting at him and said, "Don't you know these people decide on peace and war?" What do you think? Do they?
Well, I mean, a lot of them do. I mean, if you've got heads of NATO and the NSA and, the Allied Supreme Commander of Europe, they do decide on peace and war. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, they shouldn't really be discussing it with the heads of banks and hedge funds.
The people that can make the money.
Defence contractors.
They can make money out of the war. Yeah,
it gives
absolutely.
them a heads up.
Yes, I suppose they can sort of do a bit of insider dealing and make some even more money out of it. Anyway, look, Hannah Borno, speaking to you from London. Thanks very much for joining us on the Politics Show.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Good to chat. Thanks.
Martin Summers, what do you make of these people?
Well, I was just thinking what Hannah was saying there. In 2013, Imposimato, who's the head of the Italian Supreme Court, he wrote a book in 2012 about NATO terrorism, and he was in the Corriere della Sera, which is a sort of daily telegraph in Italy, and he said, well, fundamentally, the Bilderbergers are the terrorists. That's the head of the Italian Supreme Court. who was the investigating magistrate on the Bologna bomb and the assassination of Aldo Moro, the Prime Minister of Italy.
Fascinating. Also, finally, some last news for today. The US has been bombing in East Syria. 115 civilians were killed, hardly reported compared to what's happened in Manchester. And also, the US has admitted killing 105 civilians in a strike in Mosul.
Yes, but it just still doesn't justify some idiot going and blowing up lots of teenage girls in Manchester. If you're that brave, go and attack a military target.
OK, Martin, that's all for this week. It's time to sign off for the Murdoch News. That's all for this week. Time to sign off for the Murdoch News at 7. Coming up live on Facebook, hopefully, it's Arabian Nights with Mohammed Makawi and Yusuf. Thanks to our guests in the first hour. They were Molly Scott-Cato for the Greens, Annabelle Tall for the Conservatives and Stephen Williams for the Lib Dems. Thanks also to Old Labour Oxford economist Martin Summers and to our journalist guest. We heard at the top of the second hour, Amandala Thomas Johnson, also there from Hannah Borno. Our sister show Dialects on BCFM at noon every Tuesday. This show's story links and comment page is at thisweek.org.uk. Download our MP3s and you can listen in the car, iPlayer, anywhere you like. You'll find me on Twitter at Tony Gosling. Here's wishing you a relaxing and enjoyable BCFM weekend. Billy Quain's Saturday edition tomorrow morning at 10. The Real Musical Deal Sunday evening at 7 with Danny Lopsh. I'll leave you with music from 1967. Yes, it's Aretha Franklin. Do please join us at the same time next week. God bless, and don't let the banksters get you down.
This is Bristol's BCFM on